In 2019, a lost memory card found on an Anchorage street revealed unspeakable horrors. Within it were videos documenting brutal crimes that would soon lead to the arrest of Brian Stephen Smith. What began as a chance discovery unraveled a chilling case that shocked the city and exposed the darkness hiding beneath the surface.
In early October 2019, Anchorage police received a disturbing tip. A local woman had stumbled upon a memory card lying on the ground near a hotel. Curiosity led her to insert the card into her phone, unaware that it held dark secrets. What she discovered was nothing short of horrifying. The card contained videos and photos of a brutal crime. The footage depicted a man torturing and ultimately murdering a woman in what appeared to be a hotel room. The sounds of her screams echoed chillingly, recorded in vivid detail. Investigators wasted no time tracing the origins of the card. Through metadata embedded in the files, they were able to identify the suspect. The man in the video was Brian Stephen Smith, a South African immigrant living in Anchorage. Smith was no stranger to local authorities, but his criminal record was minor. This, however, would elevate him to infamy. Surveillance footage and credit card transactions placed Smith at the scene of the crime around the time the videos were filmed. Anchorage police acted swiftly. They located Smith and brought him in for questioning. Initially, Smith denied any involvement. His calm demeanor seemed unsettling to the detectives, considering the gravity of the evidence. But the memory card spoke louder than Smith's words. Police charged him with the murder of the woman in the video. Identifying the victim, however, proved more difficult. The brutality of the attack left few recognizable features. Forensic experts carefully analyzed the video. They managed to extract fingerprints and DNA evidence from the hotel room where the crime occurred. Slowly, they pieced together the victim's identity. Her name was Veronica Abocek, a woman who had been missing for weeks. As the investigation progressed, Smith's connections to other missing persons came under scrutiny. Authorities began to suspect that Veronica might not have been his only victim. Smith's cold, calculated approach pointed to a disturbing possibility. By mid-October, the public was made aware of the charges. News outlets broadcasted images of Smith and details of the memory card's content. The community's reaction was a mix of shock and fear. Police urged anyone with information to come forward. They believed more victims might be out there, waiting for justice. Anchorage, a city rarely associated with such crimes, found itself in the spotlight of national news. Smith remained in custody as prosecutors built their case. The disturbing nature of his alleged crimes left even seasoned professionals shaken. But the worst was yet to be uncovered. In the weeks following Smith's arrest, investigators expanded their search. They scoured Smith's home, vehicle, and personal devices, uncovering more troubling evidence. Additional memory cards were found, containing similar videos of violent encounters. This discovery confirmed the police's fears. Veronica Abocek was not Smith's sole victim. Another woman, later identified as Kathleen Henry, appeared in the recordings. She too had been missing for months, her disappearance previously unsolved. Authorities meticulously combed through the footage, gathering as much information as possible. Smith's methodical approach suggested a pattern. Each recording was time-stamped and organized, as if Smith was curating his crimes. Prosecutors worked closely with detectives to establish a clear timeline. The video spanned over a year, indicating that Smith had likely been active for longer than initially thought. His victims, marginalized women, were carefully selected. Interviews with Smith's acquaintances painted a picture of a man who led a double life. To the public, Smith appeared reserved and quiet. Privately, however, he harbored a dark obsession that grew unchecked. Smith's defense team attempted to challenge the validity of the evidence. They argued that the videos alone did not directly prove Smith's involvement. However, DNA evidence found at the crime scenes directly linked him to the victims. As the trial approached, more victims were discovered. Testimonies from family members of missing women added emotional weight to the case. Smith's composed demeanor in court only fueled public outrage. The prosecution presented the videos as irrefutable proof of Smith's guilt. Jurors watched in silence as the footage unfolded, leaving an indelible mark on their memory. No one left the courtroom unaffected by what they had witnessed. The case of Brian Stephen Smith serves as a grim reminder of the hidden darkness that can lurk beneath seemingly ordinary lives. Anchorage, a community known for its resilience, found itself forever changed by the haunting legacy left behind. By the end of the trial, Smith was convicted of multiple counts of first-degree murder. His sentencing brought a measure of closure to the families of the victims. But for the city of Anchorage, scars remained.
Okay, so get ready. This one is pretty disturbing and fascinating. It's the kind of case that just makes you wonder what goes on behind closed doors, you know? We're going to be going through a ton of stuff, articles, court documents. We've even got some psychological analyses of this guy, Brian Stephen Smith.
Yeah, the thing about this case, I mean, what's really interesting is how this, ordinary thing, this memory card, ended up being like the key to the whole thing,
Yeah.
So it blew the whole case open.
It's crazy, right? I mean, sometimes the biggest discoveries come from the most unexpected places. So, Brian Stephen Smith, he was a South African immigrant living like a normal life, in Anchorage, Alaska. Had a minor criminal record, but nothing really unusual. But then everything changed. This woman, she found a memory card just lying near a hotel.
It's like something out of a movie, right? I mean, can you imagine? She's probably thinking she's going to find like vacation photos. Something like that, And instead, she finds herself staring at this horrific stuff. Pictures and videos of a woman being tortured and murdered.
That's got to be just terrifying, right? Talk about wrong place, wrong time. But in a way, I mean, it's like fate, right? Because her curiosity, that simple act, it set off this whole chain of events. And it uncovered this horrific truth. So the investigators, they were able to identify Smith pretty quickly just from, like, the videos and the data on the card.
Yeah, that was incredible, actually. I mean, how fast they were able to use digital forensics,
Yeah.
It was cutting edge at the time. They got all this metadata from the files on the card, timestamps, even location data. And they were able to, check all of that with surveillance footage and credit card transactions. So they placed Smith at the crime scene, at the exact time all those horrific videos were recorded.
So they basically had this, airtight digital trail leading right back to him. It's like straight out of a crime show. Except it actually happened.
Yeah, and then it gets even weirder, right?
Yeah.
So they bring him in for questioning, and Smith just denies everything. But what really got to the investigators, what really struck them, was how calm he was, collected, almost indifferent, like he just didn't care.
So he wasn't, freaking out or trying to come up with a story or anything. I mean, that's got to be a red flag, right? It's calculated composure. I mean, does that fit the profile of, someone who could do something like this?
Well, you see it a lot in people who commit violent crimes.
Yeah.
This kind of disconnect, between what they've done and how they react.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember, every case is different, So behavioral patterns are just one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, that's true. So while Smith's putting on this act, trying to stay calm, the investigators, they had this other challenge, identifying the victim. I mean, with how brutal everything was, it wasn't easy. So can you tell us a bit about what they had to do to, give her back her name?
This is where forensic science really, comes into its own. The investigators, they had to analyze everything, the video, the crime scene, everything. Fingerprint analysis from the video, that was a challenge. But it helped. And then there was DNA evidence comparing samples to missing persons databases.
It's amazing what they can do with technology these days, right? So after all that work, they finally identified her. Veronica Abuchuk. She had been reported missing just weeks before. It's just so sad. A life cut short, a family left with so many questions.
Absolutely. I mean, it's easy to get lost in the details of a case like this, but we have to remember the victim, and everyone she left behind.
Right, of course. So the investigation kept going, and the authorities started to notice something really unsettling. Smith's name kept coming up, connected to other missing person cases. And they started to wonder, was this memory card just the beginning? Was Veronica Abuchuk his only victim?
That's the question that just kept gnawing at them, right? Had they stumbled on a one-time thing?
Yep.
Or was there something much bigger, much more sinister going on?
And all of this happening in Anchorage, a city that's not exactly known for, gruesome crimes. You can just imagine the fear, right, gripping the whole community as this news starts to spread.
The impact of something like this is huge. People lose their sense of security. They feel vulnerable.
It's a wound that takes a long time to heal. But the investigation wasn't over. Not even close. In fact, they made another discovery. More memory cards.
And this is where it gets really bad. Because these new cards, they confirmed everything they were starting to suspect. They were dealing with way more than just a single crime.
So these new memory cards, what was on them?
Ugh, it was bad. They found videos of this other woman she had been missing for months, Kathleen Henry.
So 2 women, both victims. And the details, it's all just so disturbing. And you mentioned earlier that Smith documented his crimes, really meticulously.
That's one of the things that makes this whole thing so creepy. Every video was time-stamped, organized, like he was curating a collection or something. It wasn't just random, This was planned. It shows a real need for control. You see that a lot with serial offenders.
God, that's terrifying. It's like he wanted to remember it all, like he was creating some kind of twisted legacy.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Psychologists and criminologists, they've been trying to figure this out for years. Some think it's about reliving the crime, to feel powerful, Others, they say it could be something deeper, like a compulsion, like they need to document it to try and make sense of it, or even justify it.
So it wasn't just about the violence itself, it was about controlling the narrative. Wow. This case just keeps getting more and more complex.
Yeah, it's a deep rabbit hole. And as they looked into the videos, they realized it had been going on for over a year, much longer than they thought at first. And his victims, they weren't random. It was always marginalized women, like he was seeking them out.
He was targeting them. So it wasn't just a crime of opportunity. This was predatory behavior. Can you imagine living in Anchorage and knowing this guy was out there, just blending in?
It really shook people up. It makes you question everything, who can you trust?
And remember, everyone said he was quiet, reserved, nobody suspected anything. Is that whole duality thing, right? The public face versus the private darkness.
Exactly. They live these double lives, blending right in, hiding in plain sight. It's chilling. It really shows you that you can't judge a book by its cover.
So let's talk about the trial. Smith's lawyers, they tried to say the videos didn't prove anything. Is that a common strategy?
Oh, yeah, that's pretty standard. They always try to poke holes in the prosecution's case. But in this case, they had a ton of other evidence. Like, they documented everything so carefully. Who had access to the memory cards, when, where. That's called the chain of custody.
Chain of custody. So that means they kept track of the evidence every step of the way to make sure nobody tampered with it, right?
They had to be really careful because the defense also tried to say the videos could have been faked. Planted,
Okay.
But the prosecution, they had experts analyze everything. They proved the videos were real.
So they had to shut down any doubts about the videos, make sure the jury understood that what they were seeing was the real deal.
Exactly. And they went even further. They had these digital forensics experts. They explained all the technical stuff to the jury, showed how the timestamps and location data in the videos matched up with other evidence, like surveillance footage, Smith's credit card records. They really connected all the dots.
So it wasn't just showing the videos. They had to explain them, too, make it all make sense.
Right. And then they had the DNA evidence. They matched Smith's DNA to samples from the crime scenes. It was airtight.
DNA is hard to argue with, especially when it backs up all the other evidence. So what did the defense do? Did they try to say the DNA was wrong?
They tried. They questioned how the DNA was handled. said maybe it was contaminated, tried to find any little mistake, anything to make the jury doubt the results.
I mean, I get it. They had to try something. But with all that evidence, it must have been a tough case for them to fight.
Yeah, it really was. And then there was the human element. The prosecution brought in the victims' families. They talked about the women they lost, their lives, their hopes and dreams. It was really powerful.
I bet. Those stories must have really impacted everyone in the courtroom. Put a face to the names, reminded everyone that these were real people.
Exactly. It showed the real cost of Smith's actions, all the pain and lies he caused.
And through all of this, Smith, he just stayed stone-faced. No emotion. Did that hurt his case?
You never know what a jury is thinking. But a lot of people were talking about how cold he seemed, like he didn't care at all. And that probably didn't help him. It played right into the prosecution's hands, made him look like a monster.
It's just so hard to wrap your head around, the crimes were so awful, and he just seemed empty.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? How can someone do these things and show no remorse? It's a mystery.
So, as the trial was ending, did anyone think he might get away with it?
I don't think so. I mean, the evidence was just overwhelming. But, they had to go through the whole process. It was up to the jury to decide, and they had a big responsibility.
What about the people in Anchorage? They had been living in fear for months. What was it like when they finally got the verdict?
It was a huge relief. Everyone had been holding their breath. It was like a weight lifted off their shoulders, like they could finally start to heal.
But even when someone is found guilty, those wounds, they take a long time to heal. The families, the community, they'll be dealing with this for years.
True. Justice is important.
Yeah.
But it's just one step. There's still so much healing that needs to happen.
In this case, it really raises some big questions about evil, about the darkness that can hide inside people.
You're right. It shows us that we can't always see what's lurking beneath the surface, and we need to be careful.
It's a heavy topic. We've covered a lot today. Before we wrap up, I want to take a moment to think about the victims. Veronica Buchuk and Kathleen Henry. Their lives were cut short. We can't forget them.
Absolutely. We need to remember them.
Yeah.
And honor their memory.
We've spent the last 2 parts going through this case, all the evidence, the trial. It's been a lot. But the question I keep coming back to, and I bet our listeners are too, is why? Why would someone do something like this? What could possibly drive a person to commit such horrific acts? Is there any way to understand the mind of a serial killer?
That's the question, isn't it? It's the one that everyone wants an answer to. Criminologists, psychologists, we've been trying to figure it out for years. And honestly, there isn't one easy answer. There's no single thing that explains it.
So there's no magic formula. It's more about looking at a bunch of different things. Psychological factors, social factors, maybe even biology.
Right. It's like a puzzle, with a ton of pieces. And each case is different. Each one has its own unique set of circumstances. With Smith, there were some things in his past, some minor offenses, some behavioral issues, but nothing that screamed, future serial killer.
So no warning signs, nothing that could have tipped people off. It's almost scarier that way. Anyone could be hiding this kind of darkness.
That's what makes these cases so unsettling. It really shakes you up. Because we want to believe that we can spot danger, right? That evil has some kind of tell. But it's not that simple.
And Smith, he was so good at hiding it, putting on this normal face while doing these horrific things. And that's a big part of what makes this case so disturbing, right?
Absolutely. The fact that he could separate those two parts of himself, his public life and his private demons, is chilling. It's like a level of detachment that's hard to grasp.
I keep wondering, did anyone see through the act? Even a little. Were there any hints?
The people who knew him, they said he was quiet, kept to himself, bit of a loner. Some people said he was cold, like he lacked empathy. But nobody thought he was capable of this.
Yeah.
It just goes to show evil can hide anywhere.
It really makes you question everything, This case, it forces us to face some really uncomfortable truths, like the fact that darkness can exist anywhere, in anyone.
It's a hard truth to swallow, but it's important to remember. It's a reminder to be vigilant, to pay attention to those little things that might be off. But we can't let it consume us. We can't live in fear.
It's about finding that balance, right? Being aware, but not letting fear take over.
Exactly. And I think this case also highlights something else, the importance of community, of looking out for each other. If we can create a space where people feel safe speaking up, where they can ask for help without feeling judged, that's a step in the right direction.
Now, what can we do? How do we take these lessons and actually make a difference?
Well, it's a big problem. It's not going to be easy, but we have to start somewhere. Individually, we need to be aware, informed, and willing to speak up if something seems wrong. As a society, we need to tackle the bigger issues: poverty, inequality, lack of mental health care. Those things all contribute to violence. And I think most importantly, we need to be kinder, more understanding, more compassionate.
It's a long road ahead, but it's one we have to travel if we want to create a world where these kinds of tragedies are less likely to happen. So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the Bryan Steven Smith case, I'm hoping our listeners walk away with more than just the chills. I hope they have a better understanding of just how complex human behavior can be and how important it is to be aware, to be vigilant, and to be kind.
Well said. I think that's a great takeaway. These cases, they're terrifying, but they also remind us how important it is to connect with each other, to support each other, and to work together to build a better world. A world where things like this don't happen as often. A world where healing and hope can win.
That's a great note to end on. Thank you so much for helping us make sense of this case.
My pleasure. Anytime.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.